Chapter 7, Bread and Water. Jack ran back to the river with a loaf of bread under one arm and a halfpenny still in his pocket. He hadn't found Mrs. Booth, but he was able to keep his promise to get something for Amy and him to eat. He'd gone back to the same bakery where the man had turned him away when he'd asked for a job. At first he thought that he'd never give that man his business, but the more he thought about it, it made him feel good to imagine slapping down his penny on the counter and demanding the biggest loaf of that good-looking white bread that he could see. He'd show that baker man he wasn't a beggar. But when he got to the bakery, the man wasn't anywhere around. There was only a girl, just a little older than Amy, minding the shop. He bought the loaf and soon forgot about the ornery baker as he ran to the river. He scrambled over the wall and dropped to the narrow strip of sand before. "Amy! Amy! Look here!" he called as he worked his way over the rocks and around the pillar. "Jack," said Amy as she got up from the sand and came toward him, "where have you been? You've been away most of the day. What you been up to?" Then she saw the loaf he was holding out. "Jack, where'd you get that bread? You didn't steal it, did you?" "No, I didn't steal it, and I didn't beg for it either. I earned some money and I bought it. What's more, I still got a halfpenny left right here in my pocket." Jack pulled out the little copper and held it in the palm of his hand for Amy to inspect. "Oh, Jack, I'm so hungry. I'm glad you got something to eat." She broke off a hunk of bread and began eating it. Jack grinned and did the same. Then Jack realized that in spite of how hungry he had been, he had come all the way back home to share the bread with Amy before taking any himself. "It wouldn't have been right to eat it by myself," he thought. "Whatever we've got is for sharing." What was even stranger, he was thinking of this damp cave as home. He looked around as he chewed. The place really was terrible. "Did you find Mrs. Booth, Jack?" "No, but I'll look some more tomorrow. She's bound to turn up soon." He didn't want to tell Amy that even though he hadn't found Catherine Booth, he had found the Salvation Army. Then she'd want to know why he hadn't asked the army where Mrs. Booth was. That might lead to telling her how he'd earned the money, and he knew she'd be angry. But she was sure enjoying the bread, and so was he. "Look, Jack," said Amy, after taking a few bites, "I appreciate the bread, but finding Mrs. Booth is more important than wasting time earning money." "Well, I'll try to find her. Trying's not good enough. We've got to find her." "Well, we got to eat too, don't we?" Jack said angrily. "But we can't keep staying in this old cave. We have to find Uncle Sedgwick, and Mrs. Booth is our only hope." Amy fell silent, and Jack didn't try to answer her. What could he say without giving himself away? Besides, when Amy got silent like that, Jack knew she was angry. He decided to be silent too, hoping that pretty soon the whole thing would blow over. Jack knew it wasn't the best way to work out problems, but he was a little bit mad at himself, and he didn't want to admit what he had done. Sure enough, in a few moments, Amy grabbed the old bucket and said, "I've been working on this broken bucket. I got the slats fitted back together, and I scrubbed it out with sand. Then all day I've been soaking the wood, so the wood will swell. I put some rocks in it and held it in the underwater. Now it doesn't leak. At least it holds water all the way up to where this one slat is broken. You could take it up and get some fresh water from the fountain up by the street. Then we'd have drinking water." "Oof, that'd be awful heavy to carry," said Jack, looking at the bucket. It wasn't such a big bucket, but it didn't have a handle, and with a broken slat he'd have to carry it tipped part way over to carry enough water to make it worth his trip. That could be heavy and hard to carry. But Jack, I haven't had anything to drink since we came down here last night. I was afraid to drink the river water. It's so dirty. I'm sure it would give a person the fever." Her idea made sense, but he answered, "Let me just sit here and rest a while. I've been running all over town." "Jack, I really am very thirsty." All right. Just let me finish my piece of bread." When Jack finally got back with the water, Amy had another fire laid. It was getting near dusk, and the lamplighter would be along soon. "I found a couple more sticks to use as matches," she said. "You know, if you were up there when the lamplighter came along, he'd probably just give you a light." He probably would, but Jack didn't want to ask him. It would look so dumb asking for a light. Why would a boy on the street need to light a little stick? What would he tell the man, Jack wondered. "I'll just climb up the pole after he's gone," said Jack irritably. "Besides, since I fetched this water, I need a drink." He started to reach his hands into their water bucket to scoop up a drink when Amy shouted, "Don't put your dirty hands in our drinking water. Go wash them first." "I thought you said the river was dirty." "So it is. Too dirty to drink, but it's cleaner than your hands. Looks like you've been playing in the mud pies. And they stink, too. What did you do today to earn that money? All right, give me the stick, Jack said, not wanting to answer Amy about his earnings. I'll go up and get the stupid light and wash my hands when I get back. When the fire was blazing and the children were sitting around it eating some more bread, Amy bent her hurt foot back and forth, testing her ankle. It's a bit better, but I still don't think I should walk around town tomorrow. Would you mind going out by yourself again, Jack, to look for Mrs. Booth? We've got to find her. She's our only hope. We can't stay down here much longer. Jack grunted but didn't feel like talking. What if he found Mrs. Booth and one of the Salvationists recognized him and told her he was one of the boys throwing things at the band? Maybe he'd just go looking for Uncle Sedgwick himself. Later, when Amy was curled up sleeping by the fire with her green shawl thrown over her, he sat staring into the little flames. The song that the Salvationists were singing kept playing in his mind. We're bound for the land of the pure and holy. And then that haunting chorus, will you go? Will you go? The music had sounded pretty. He especially liked that horn. Thinking about it now made him feel bad that he'd thrown stuff at them. Back and forth he argued with himself. It wasn't that bad. I didn't really hurt anyone. But I must admit, they didn't do nothing to deserve it. And even if they had, throwing horse manure is pretty mean. But we needed the money. Finally, he drifted off into a fitful sleep filled with dreams of the Salvationists climbing on a train and singing. But every time Jack tried to get on the train with them, they'd sadly shake their heads and say, sorry, we're bound for the land of the pure and the holy, and pure and holy you're certainly not.